I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, in most places, it is okay to take your mask off now. All of this happens just in time to put on another mask for Halloween. We'll be looking at the latest COVID pronouncements and also examine if living with virus and tropical threats has increased the level of malaise. With elections coming soon, we will look if the Defund the Police movement has gained any traction locally, and there is growing controversy over one of the 4 proposed constitutional amendments. Elsewhere, we will hear from the reporter who wrote the bizarre story about the family dispute over the late Edwin Edwards' remains. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, and from the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Gordon Russell, managing editor for Investigations, Stephanie Grace, political columnist, and Tyler Bridges, staff writer. All righty, let's go on over to E first and the latest about COVID and mask wearing.
Yeah, well, I'm personally disappointed because this was going to be my my mask for Halloween, a Batman mask.
Nice.
Okay,
Well,
it had a bat and everything. Now there's no need to wear it. But I may be the only person that's disappointed, though. It looks like that this may be over. Even Governor John Bel Edwards, usually the chief executives have been very cautious anytime they've made a move, and he even said the latest surge appears to be over or coming to an end. It was good news, I think, to a lot of people early in the week when they announced that he was lifting the mask mandate, subject to some regulations, public health institutions, but usually when it's happened, whenever the governor has done one thing, Mayor Cantrell or somebody from Cantrell's office has said, well, not so fast in Orleans Parish, and there's been a little bit of a delay. But it wasn't that much of a delay. It was until Friday, and so as of today, that the mandate has been listed in Orleans Parish, except K through 12. But there's also local school options on that in public transportation and in public institutions. And I can tell you, if you go into a hospital or health institutions, the first thing they say is put your mask on. And if you tell them, well, look, you don't have to do it anymore, he said, well, they haven't told us that yet. And so I think those places are sticking to it. Just today, some figures came out that nationwide, that cases of COVID related to Delta down 60% since September. In Orleans Parish, there's all kind of numbers going around, but Orleans Parish has been very impressive with the vaccination rate. It's about 76% of the people in Orleans Parish have been vaccinated, and so I think at this point we can move on. The city hall is saying, look, you can still wear the mask, okay? If there's an indoor event and if there's not proper social distancing, you might be well advised to wear the mask. And so they're still urging that caution, as they always will. But we may be past a big hurdle right now.
Now, for airplanes and airports, and you're still supposed to wear a mask for that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those are all federal regs.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, like you said, for schools, K through 12, it's really up to the school district how they're going to handle that, right?
Right. And so I think we're going to see a lot of infighting going on in the next few weeks on that particular issue, yeah. But it's local option on it.
And of course, now boosters are out there too. Not just the vaccines that people are getting, but you can go and get your boosters now. That's kind of getting to be a wider thing. How is that rate going?
I haven't seen anything on that rate particular. I think they're talking about the 2 vaccine shots, but I haven't heard anything to say negative about that. So.
Well, I think people enjoy not having to wear a mask. That's for sure. Okay, well, you can still wear your Batman mask. It is Halloween. Nobody.
Well, okay.
you can still do that. Okay, E.
Let me just say, I think you should wear it. I just had a sister who got it, and it was a breakthrough case, and she said it is not fun. So
yeah,
I'm gonna keep wearing my mask when I'm around other people inside.
Yeah, I know. I have a family member too who recently got a breakthrough case, and this is after traveling, going to airports, flying, and came home with COVID. He's not pleasant at all. Okay, thanks a lot, E. And let's go on over to Gordon right now. And we've all been through a lot with the pandemic, and then Hurricane Ida, which so many of us stayed for, and we're not happy about the fact that we stayed for because it was a tough storm. Then the aftermath was just tough to live through as well. So you wrote a piece about are people kind of just in a real funk right now and thinking, why am I here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I got a lot of feedback to this piece, and I only wrote the piece because I found that all the conversations I was having with people kept coming back to this point, and I felt like in all walks of life, people were saying, you know, whether I was talking to a lawyer or a politician or a neighbor or whatever, they would say that Ida, it was partly Ida, but Ida was kind of a breaking point for a lot of people, or a point that caused people to question why they were here. And I think it's the buildup of a lot of things. It's, you know, everything from the usual quality of life issues that we struggle with in New Orleans, from, you know, crime and not great city services and public schools and those kinds of things, to the certain costs going up, insurance, flood insurance, people finding out their insurance doesn't really cover them for very much after Ida in some cases. So there's all those things, and then there's the kind of, the last couple of years have really brought global warming home to people in New Orleans, I think, where you feel like this hurricane season is really dangerous, and you're constantly watching the Gulf to see what's going on out there. And last year, of course, was a really busy one. This year, not as busy, but we had Ida, which was very scary. And it sort of feels like this is the new normal. And even if your home doesn't get blown away, or, you know, you have to worry about just evacuating for potentially weeks at a time. It's very expensive, very unpleasant, and it's no fun to live looking over your shoulder. So I think those are all the things people are feeling. And then, of course, on top of that, we've been living in a pandemic, which so has everybody else. But I think a lot of us who live here recognize that New Orleans there's challenges and struggles to living in New Orleans, but there's a lot of beautiful things about living in New Orleans. You know, the sort of the people first and foremost, and then the street culture and the art and the music and everything that makes the city such a joy to live in. And we haven't experienced a lot of that in the last 18 months. And I think that has caused people to question, well, why am I putting up with all this other stuff when I'm not getting the stuff that I love so much about New Orleans in return? That's what I heard from a lot of people.
You know, I was interested when I saw your piece, because I too have heard of that from a lot of people. Some people who are just die-hard Louisianians or New Orleanians are thinking, I'm not so sure about this. Because, you know, the storm was scary, and certainly the pandemic was difficult and scary to live through as well. But the aftermath, after the storm, was really, because a lot of us were here, not seeing everything stand up, you know, pretty quickly, having the energy problems, the gasoline problems, that was really discouraging too.
Yeah, I think that was a part of all this. And I think, you know, a major difference between this storm, I mean, it's hard to compare Ida to Katrina, and obviously the level of devastation and death is nothing alike. But for Katrina, most people were not here. And by the time they came back, some of those things, I mean, there was obviously a lot of things had not been cleaned up, but you weren't sitting, I mean, I was here for the whole time, and so there was trash in the streets, obviously, and even in the dry parts of town for months, but nobody who was living in Houston or wherever was really conscious of that, and nobody expected things to be stood back up. Whereas once this storm passed, I think people thought, okay, now it's time to get back to, you know, being able to gas up my car and go to the grocery store and turn on my air conditioning and all these things. And, you know, you could argue that it didn't take that long to get some of those things back, but when you were here for all of that time, it felt like a long time.
Gordon, last weekend there were two feel-good events. One was that Crew of Boo parade, which is usually, you know, pretty much a minor parade, but it was a huge parade this year in terms of the public impact. And to see the crowds out there in Marion, in the French Quarter, I was just excited to be outside in the parade atmosphere. And then Sunday, the Symphony had a concert in City Park, and there was a big crowd there. And to be sitting outdoors and hear the symphony, so to be able to experience all these things that we've been denied for so long, and I know it's just one thing, but at least there were signs of life out there.
Yeah, and I think the Crew of Boo turnout was a sign of the hunger people have for this kind of thing. And it could be that this malaise, quote unquote, is something that will pass. A lot of it may pass pretty quickly when people are able to experience the things that they love again. And of course, with the Delta wave winding down for now, and the weather improving, and this is always the best time of year in New Orleans. The fall leading into winter, leading into Mardi Gras. People's spirits could change pretty quickly.
And I think we have to remember that it's a better problem to have than what a lot of people in our state are facing, frankly. In Lake Charles, which is still, recovering from hurricanes last year, they had a tornado this week.
Yeah.
Houma, Thibodaux, Laplace. I mean, it's really tough out there, and in some ways, the fact that events are starting again, I think, probably will perk some people up.
And also, there's the question, if not here, where do you go? No place is fail-safe, in terms of natural
Right.
disasters, and anything could happen.
It's important to
Didn't
remember.
your guy go to Cincinnati in your story?
Yeah, the guy that one guy I interviewed moved to Cincinnati. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that I think are sort of bumming people out right now are things you can't really run away from. I mean, climate change and the pandemic being two prime examples.
Inflation, all of these things.
But when you're in when you're at home in your bunker every day, you think, maybe it's nicer someplace else,
Yeah, but there's no place like this area. And you said, the main thing first and foremost is, this is what you pointed out, Gordon, is the people. And that's true, the real friendly population that we have here. I mean, here you can find out somebody's life story in an elevator ride, or standing, in the grocery somewhere over vegetables. So we'll see where it goes. We just need to keep our chin up. But I think people are definitely understanding the word of adaptation and resiliency a bit more in terms of climate change.
Yeah.
All righty, thanks a lot. Let's go on over to Stephanie right now. And defund the police is something that we've heard a lot over the past year or so, but what's it looking like here?
Right, and it's interesting because it's still a very hot topic in other places. Minneapolis, where of course George Floyd was killed, they're about to have a referendum on defunding the police, and it's things are pretty heated. Here we have this city council races, we have the mayor's race, and it's interesting that we have really, for the most part, very, very progressive candidates. People are very much in tune with the general criminal justice reform agenda, which includes, less incarceration and things like that. But nobody is running to defund the police. Nobody, who's a major candidate is running to defund the police, I should say. There are some who, some people on the ballot who are, but people like J.P. Morrell and Kristen Palmer and Helena Moreno and, again, they really have criminal justice credentials, but none of them are saying we need fewer police. Everybody is saying we need, in some ways, more police, or to allow our police officers to kind of spread themselves out more, and more support for them so they can do more. Because of course we're well below the number of police we've had that the city has wanted for a long time. 1,600 is the number that's been out there. You can debate it, but we're at kind of 1,150 or so, and it's showing, and it's tough. We are facing a crime wave, and it's I think it's a couple things. It's the whole defund concept, I think, is confusing to people, because the idea behind it, if you ask the proponents, is you take money from on-the-street policing from the actual officers and you kind of shift it to social services, with the idea being that there are a lot of things police handle that maybe they should not be handling. They're not the best people to handle. Mental health professionals should be handling things like that. That's actually something that pretty much everybody running for office supports. Not taking money away from police, but adding this other component. And in fact, that's starting to happen. There are policies being put in place. So the idea that it's not kind of an either or, it's an and. And I have to say, I think it's somewhat the consent decree. I think the fact that New Orleans police still face a lot of problems. They're still under their federal consent decree. There's disagreement if you ask the candidates, do they think the NOPD is ready to get out from under federal oversight right now, or just on its way? And not everybody agrees, but everyone agrees they're moving in the right direction. And that, particularly they've had some programs that really would hopefully prevent a situation like the George Floyd killing. A program that's being copied around the country is called EPIC, Ethical Policing. Anyway, it's basically bystander training. It is so if you are a police officer and you see one of your colleagues doing something he or she shouldn't be doing, you intervene. It's techniques for that, and that of course is a really important point. Part of policing in a way that respects the community and that can get community support.
And so crime, of course, is something that is a really important issue. It means a lot to people concerned about it. How is the public feeling about the police?
You know, not terrible, given that the crime numbers are up. I mean, I think there's a lot of hope that we can get more police officers. There are proposals. J.P. Morrell and a few other people have been talking about changing civil service rules so that if we hire cops from other places, they don't have to, you know, at senior levels, they don't have to go back and start at the entry level, which is, you know, we get poached all the time for people who can make lateral transfers. So that's, I think, an interesting concept that we're going to hear more about. You know, ways to pay better, ways to make it, you know, just really beef up the numbers because that has been, you know, a constant struggle.
Okay, well, we'll see where that goes. All right, thanks a lot, Stephanie. Tyler, over to you. You wrote a piece about the late Governor Edwin Edwards' final resting place.
Yeah, I remember I was on the show here with talking about Edwin Edwards after he died on the show with John Hill and Norman Robinson. It was probably the funnest show I'd been on here. Had no idea that just a few weeks later I'd be continuing to write about Edwin Edwards, but perhaps it's not a surprise. You know, he generated news for so long and was so colorful so long while he was living. I guess it's inevitable that he would continue to make news and be colorful in death. But yeah, the story was that you know, he died on July 12th, and I got a message from one of his adult children, Victoria, complaining about what Edwin Edwards' third wife, Trina, had done, which she and two of her siblings said was a complete surprise, was that not too long after Edwin Edwards had been buried in Baton Rouge, that Trina Edwards had him dug up and cremated. And the three adult children, Anna Edwards, Victoria Edwards, and Stephen Edwards, told me the same thing, which was that Edwin Edwards had been adamantly opposed to the idea of cremation. He thought it was a horrible idea, and yet that's what Trina had decided to do with his remains.
And so, but she says he told her, do what you want, you're my surviving widow.
Yeah, and I think legally that is absolutely true. But again, the older children say this is really, really something he did not want. And the article that I did with Mark Ballard exposed the rift, which that had been there before Edwin Edwards' death, the rift between Trina, again, who is his third wife, and the adult children of Edwin Edwards. And remember that Trina had a child with Edwin Edwards, Eli, who's 8 years old. He is younger than the children, than the grandchildren of Edwin Edwards' children that he had with Elaine Edwards. So, it always sort of seems to be a strange situation, and it's continuing to be so.
Also, there was complaints from the older children that during the services for the governor, for the late governor, there were no seats reserved for them, for the children, the older children.
Yeah, and they take that as what they believe is a pettiness that Trina Edwards was engaging in against them after her, particularly after Edwin Edwards died. That was the service at the old state capitol.
Where is the former governor now?
The old former, apparently
the late governor.
Yeah, his remains are on a nightstand next to her bed, apparently.
But Tyler, do we know why she did this? Was it a cost thing? Was it a power thing, or why?
Well, all we know is what she stated, which was that she felt a great unease that Edwin Edwards was no longer by their side. So she says both Eli, again, who's 8 years old, and her, the two of them decided that it was important to have him at home again. And she had no discussion with the older children about this. She notified them later, according to the older children. So again, it's just kind of another strange tale of Louisiana politics and the state's only four-time governor.
That seems like a difficult decision to ask an 8-year-old to make.
Yeah, and she has publicly said that Eli is autistic, so I'm not quite sure how that fits into the decision making. But you know, Victoria Edwards, one of Edwin Edwards' adult children, was very caustic. You'll remember that after Edwin Edwards was freed out of prison, got married to Trina, they did a a reality TV show, Errol. I think you said you noted the other day that everybody had panned it. Well, it was called The Governor's Wife. And so Victoria Edwards, when I was writing the story, said that Trina Edwards just doesn't want her era as a reality TV star to be over. She just wants attention for herself.
But Trina does say that ultimately she does want to place his remains in a public place.
Right, and she has said that she would love to have the remains reinterred near the statue of Huey Long in front of the Capitol. And whether that's allowed or not is not clear. And a state representative from Monroe had actually been looking at this question of not just Edwin Edwards, but any former governor. So we're going to see some more news about that with legislation, I think, next year.
Okay, because there's really no protocol in place for something like that.
Right, yeah, it's not clear what would have to happen for that.
Okay,
I think
all
it's
right.
fair to say this is an issue we've never faced before.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, Tyler, thanks a lot. Bizarre story indeed. All right, Steph, let's go on over to what's going to be coming up in the November ballot, constitutional amendments, and always people are kind of confused about those things.
Always, they're always very technical. There's always a question of how they affect individual people. There are 4 constitutional amendments, and the numbers 1 and 2 are really the ones that are causing a lot of debate.
Okay.
They're both favored by a lot of Republicans, the business community, the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, very much behind it, some kind of government reform groups, and really have widespread political support. But some opposition rising up from kind of anti-poverty groups, and in one case, LaToya Cantrell, the mayor of New Orleans. So that's Amendment 1. Amendment 1 would basically centralize collection of sales tax under the state. Right now, sales taxes are collected by most parishes. It might be the school board, it might be the sheriff. In Orleans, it's the administration. And distributed. And of course, we have very high sales taxes. This does not affect that at all. This affects how they're collected. And I think most people agree that it's something of a burden if you are doing business in all these different parishes to have to figure out how to pay taxes in all these different places under all these different systems. That's not the debate. The debate is kind of what happens when the money goes to the state, and then how quickly can it get back to the localities who rely upon it to provide services. LaToya Cantrell will point out that New Orleans' budget, 32% of it relies on sales taxes. And so the argument is really that it's fair, it is pro-business, and also there's a Supreme Court decision that probably requires it out there. The complaints include that it does not deal with the sales tax rates, still very high, and that it's going to be tough for localities to, can they count on getting their money in a timely and predictable way? And what Mayor Cantrell points to is something that absolutely people like Tyler and me have chronicled for many years, is that sometimes when there is money that needs to go from the state to the city, it gets caught up in the politics, in the Republican politics up there, the Democratic politics here. This happened quite recently with the Bond Commission, which is dominated by Republicans, statewide elected officials and legislative leaders, and they withheld some money for some construction projects in New Orleans. They delayed approving it, and that was for things like Superdome renovations, Children's Hospital, things like that.
All right, so we're starting to run out of time,
Okay.
so let's move along to the next one.
Okay, number 2 is also favored by those groups. A lot in it, basically it's a tax swap, somewhat lowering income tax rates in exchange for getting rid of a deduction that we can all take, that is basically our federal income taxes off the sales tax. Most people would not see a big change in their income taxes. Most people probably would get a little bit of a break, very little. It's not enough to make a difference. But it would trigger a bunch of different things. One is lowering corporate tax rates. One is a kind of a trigger so that if a lot of the state's doing very well and a lot of revenue is collected, there's a cap on how much you can collect, things like that. There are some progressive groups that are fighting it, saying they're worried about that cap, and they're also worried that it doesn't deal with the underlying issues, such as the fact that sales taxes tend to hit poorer people harder.
Okay.
So that's 2.
All righty, what's on 3?
3 is one of those, like, It affects only a few places, but we all vote on it. There are 5 levy districts in the state that do not have taxing authority. This would give them taxing authority, their ability to raise taxes if people within the district and also statewide vote. The important thing to know is it's not anybody in Orleans and Jefferson and those levy districts. They already have this authority. St. Tammany, it does affect.
Okie doke. And so the last one?
And the last one is number 4, and that is it would give the states some kind of leeway in terms of dipping into dedicated funds, money that is set aside and required to be used for certain purposes if we have a crisis. So you know how we're always hearing about if we have a budget crisis, the money comes out of healthcare and higher education. This would give the governor, with some safeguards, the right to dip into some other funds that normally he or she can't dip into.
And so what are we hearing from good government groups about these?
For the most part, if you're looking at like PAR and cable, public affairs, they were very much involved in writing the first 2. They are for those. If I can go back to the first one briefly, one of the controversies is that the underlying legislation has not been written yet. So how it would work, a lot of localities have been brought into it, the municipal association, the sheriffs, but it's unclear kind of exactly how it would work. You don't find that out till after you pass it. It's one of those things.
Okay, so you can go to parlouisiana.org and find out a whole lot more about this.
And cable also.
And cable, okay.
Yes.
All righty, guys, time for other stories. E, let's start with you.
New book come out by our friend Tyler Bridges here. It's called The Flight, a father's war, a son's search. There's really 2 stories here. There's his father was shot down. He was a bomber pilot during World War II. He became a prisoner of war, and about his story that happened. And then years later, Tyler going back to the places where his father was and trying to trace the story. And there's also an interesting story about the relationship of a father and his son. So a very important book by Tyler. And Tyler, congratulations. I think you got some signings coming up.
That's right, and we can go buy it right now too, right, Tyler? It's in bookstores?
It's in bookstores. People can get it at tylerbridges.com with a signed copy, and I'm also doing a book signing on Monday at 6 p.m. at Octavia Books, Uptown, New Orleans.
Okie dokie. All right, let's go on over to Gordon now for some other stories.
So we saw a little opening skirmishing perhaps in the 2023 governor's race today. One of Jeff Landry's top deputies announced that she's planning to seek the attorney general's job on the premise that he's going to run for governor. And he's already been hinting at this, Jeff Landry has. And meanwhile, Billy Nungesser, the lieutenant governor, has also indicated he'll run. And then the 2 of them had some interesting skirmishing on social media.
Okay.
So we're looks like that's a race that's starting to shape up.
All right, just beginning. Steph, real quick.
Very much so. The New Orleans city budget is out. The proposed budget by the Cantrell administration, the council's about to start hearings. There are some proposed things aren't bad. There are proposed increases for things like sanitation.
Okay, well, that's certainly needed. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. And thank you all for joining us, too. Have a good weekend, great happy Halloween, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.